Good morning. Welcome to Northwest, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. I'm Tom Ott. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm your worship associate for this morning's service. Please note that the Northwest UU gathering guidelines are reviewed as deemed necessary by the Safety Committee and are updated as needed based on their awareness of the latest science and guidance from public health authorities. After careful consideration balancing individual risks, providing a communal Sunday morning worship experience, and current practices at other UU congregations, the Safety Committee has updated the Northwest UU gathering guidelines. Face masks are optional when at the low or medium community risk for large gatherings such as Sunday services, memorial services, weddings, etc. At the high community risk level, all participants will be required to be masked indoors. At medium risk level and below, there are no restrictions on singing. At high risk level, there will be no indoor singing. Only recorded music will be used. According to the COVID Act Now website, the Detroit metro area is currently in the medium community risk level category. Therefore, we will have communal singing, and masks are optional at this time. Today's sermon will be delivered by Pastor Joshua Berg. We welcome him back into the pulpit with us. If you are a visitor online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form you will see in the chat box. If you are with us in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. Please greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are, whether you are here with us online or here in person. Then, before Alex starts the prelude, let's take a brief breath and settle into a time of worship. We begin our service today with a land acknowledgement. This land, the hills, woods, and rivers, is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabeg Three Fires Confederacy, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Badwadme. The Northwest UU congregation acknowledges the injustice of the theft of this land and the continuing presence, despite attempts at the annihilation of the indigenous people of this place. And we pledge ourselves to justice and repair both with the land and its people. We light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across this land and around the world are doing the same. We light our chalice with words from the Reverend Rebecca Savage. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people, united in love, and thirsting for restorative justice. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly towards our highest ideals.
Lift as you climb, the story of Ella Baker. Under a bright North Carolina sun, Ella rode to church with Granddaddy and Mama. When Granddaddy Mitchell stood to preach, Ella sat in the deacon's chair, legs ruler straight, ears soaking up his strong voice. He preached, give to others. He preached, join together. He spoke freedom. He asked, what do you hope to accomplish? After church, at Granddaddy's farm, the farm he and Grandma worked as slaves, the farm they toiled on like mules after emancipation, till they bought and owned it, where Ella played catchball with her cousins until Grandma said, dinner time, and afterwards, listen. Back when we was slaves, Master said, bet you marry light-skinned Carter. I said, no how. Master, also my daddy, made me plow the swamp to break me. After turning the muck, I went and jumped the broom, married proud Dark Mitchell, your granddaddy, and danced all night long. Ella drank up that story till it filled her bones. She listened to neighbors tell about chopping cotton. Many still lived in shacks, worked white people's land like her grandparents had back in slave days. On their land, her grandparents raised vegetables, hogs, and cows. On their land, they built a church and a school. Church said, help your neighbor. Mama said, lift as you climb. When Ella was about 10, Mama said, Ella, help the neighbors. Ella rounded up the motherless children, dragged them home, dunked them, scrubbed them, dressed them in clean clothes, returned them to their grateful daddy. Ella harvested peas. After her family ate their fill, she took a peck of peas to the neighbors. When strangers came over, Ella stoked the fire, warmed the food, and served it. At 14, Ella set off for boarding school in Raleigh, high school and college at Shaw University, top of her class, worked as a waitress to pay her way. After she graduated, Ella moved to New York City. She asked herself, what do I hope to accomplish? She would lift as she climbed. She joined voices that demanded, don't buy where you can't work. Negroes needed jobs. White shop owners needed Negroes to buy from their shops or they'd close. Without jobs, without money, Negroes couldn't buy from white shops. Ella and other colored people told the shop owners so. Some whites hired a few blacks. They needed each other. Ella fought for that step toward justice. She fought for rights. She fought for her people. She got a job with the NAACP, the NAACP, raising money to fight racial injustice. In the courts, by selling memberships and registering voters. The NAACP focused on finding members in the Negro elite, preachers, doctors, businessmen, but Ella had a different idea. She'd find a church, get herself invited, talk at Sunday service, make friends with everyday people, middle-class maids, shop workers, and poor sharecroppers, not just elite, and ask, what do you hope to accomplish? She listened in Mims, Florida. Our school principal asked for the teacher's pay equal to white teacher's pay. Whites dynamited his house, killed him. Ella mourned and then said, you want equal pay for Negroes? Register to vote. Choose your representative. They will listen to your complaint. That representative will fight for the people. All over the South, Ella made speeches about freedom, voting, rights, words straight from her heart to the hearts of her audience. And then she'd ask, what do you hope to accomplish? In one Virginia town, people objected to police brutality. Why'd the police beat Negroes when they hadn't committed a crime? Another town wanted better teacher salaries and school buses. Another, the use of city parks and playgrounds. They wanted fair treatment, but the Negro middle class resisted joining the NAACP and getting the vote. Why anger the white bosses? Why risk their jobs, their comforts? Why risk being hungry? Ella told this story across the tracks. Across the tracks, the poor live in filth and get diseases. Those diseases hop those itty-bitty tracks and they infect you. That made sense to the middle class. All Negroes were in this together. They'd have to risk angering their bosses. Ella and her new friends, workers, partners, believers, mostly women, walked into bar and grills, schools, beer gardens, bootblack parlors. She was always the poised lady, always Miss Baker, posing the question, what do you want to accomplish? The people wanted freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. and 100 men, mostly preachers, and Ella worked together for black freedom. They formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Churches worked with preachers at the top, handing down knowledge from the pulpit to the flock. That's how these preachers wanted to work too, like their churches did, from the top down. Ella worked from the bottom up, from the grassroots. She wanted people to solve their own problems, like her mother taught her, lifting as she climbed. But the powerful men weren't used to women working in their inner circle. Ella listened to the people and then raised their questions with the preachers. Shouldn't we harness the power of black women as leaders? Shouldn't we train local leaders? Shouldn't we create education programs? She challenged Reverend King with her ideas. Rather than just the elite and the middle class, what about the poorest? What about the people at the bottom? Dr. King didn't always agree with Ella, but he respected her. He said, Ella must head up our new organization, the SCLC, to register voters, stand up to the whites. His order came from the top down. Ella thought he should ask, not command. Still, she agreed for the cause, for the freedom movement. She'd empower people to take action. She'd register voters. Then something amazing happened. Negro students sat at whites-only lunch counters. They wanted to be served a hamburger alongside white people. In the store where they bought school supplies. In Greensboro, Nashville, Atlanta, Durham, sit-ins exploded throughout the South. Ella had never been so excited. She brought the students together at a conference at Shaw University. She wanted them to organize. A united swell of voices was more powerful than individual voices. They asked her advice. Always the teacher, she asked them, what do you hope to accomplish? They wanted to register voters. They wanted to stage sit-ins. They named themselves Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. Students staged sit-ins, some got whipped or spat on. They sat quietly, responding with nonviolence. Many were jailed. Ella listened and comforted them, brought toothbrushes and soap to their cells. She advised them, lift as you climb. The students ventured back into the fight, armed with Ella's wisdom. Tennessee tenant farmers, poor Negroes working for white plantation owners, hungry and bone-tired from overwork, tried to register to vote. White bosses evicted them from their shacks, beat them for being bold. Now the sharecroppers lived in tents. The students asked them, what do you want to accomplish? They wanted justice. They wanted to vote. They wanted to be treated like citizens. Ella worked alongside the students when they rode battered school buses and commercial buses, testing the new integration laws by breaking the old Jim Crow laws. They sat in whites-only seats. They came south to help desegregate. In Alabama, the buses were firebombed. Students were beaten, jailed. Those freedom riders of 1961 woke up the nation. Ella helped plan the rides. She advised the students in meetings, on car trips, over ice cream sundaes, at night sharing tiny beds as the students brainstormed, connected, struggled to become their own leaders. Many of them women, when it was new to be a woman leading. Ella said, "We are not fighting for the freedom of the Negro alone, but for the freedom of the human spirit." To her last days, Ella fought for freedom, lifting as she climbed. The seeds she sowed all her life continue to bear fruit today. She said, "The struggle for rights didn't start yesterday, and it has to continue until it is won." What do you hope to accomplish?
Now the students and the teachers will be joining in 2 rooms. We'll have the middle and high school students come to room B and enjoy a snack, Joys and Sorrows, and activity for making images for our canvas. Maybe even reflect on the story, which I thought was very powerful. And then the elementary students can come to the nursery and we will do something similar. So could I have Oliver come up and carry the chain flame today?
One purpose of a religious community is to encourage all who gather together to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will mutually support this self-supporting congregation and the shared plate recipient. Every other month throughout the year, Northwest shares 50% of the plate collection with the Southfield Emergency Needs Fund. Their goal is to help residents overcome personal hurdles to achieve a satisfying and productive quality of life. Human Services is a division of Southfield Community Relations. If you would like to donate, you can do so in a variety of ways that are now visible on your screen. And for those of you here in person, a collection basket is being passed for checks and cash. The reading today is A Few Miles from Fear to Freedom, a semi-autographical poetic regret and reset, which was written by Pastor Joshua Berg, who will be giving the sermon. He says he's from Detroit, close in distance, yet so far from truth. White Jew lived 2 miles north of the border, 8 Mile Road. No M&M rainbow of candy colors, those miles separated white ones from black ones. 2 decades, never traveling 2 miles from home. Black neighborhoods comprising most of the city to be feared. We visited Detroit, only together, only the safe areas. How was racism safer? Explicitly prejudiced adult struck by the implicit bias of his upbringing. He asked his mother for a tour of her youthful Detroit. His parents, Detroit expatriates, Jewish neighborhoods long vacated, swept up in white flight, escaped to Red Lobster and Blockbuster, from black people redlined and blockbusted. Crossing 8 Mile Road now, a visceral experience, conflicting emotions of fear and guilt, discomforting feelings of courage and relief. His mother's old neighborhood populated by African Americans. His mother's childhood shul, a Baptist church. The mikveh bath in working order, a repurposed baptismal font. The building unchanged, save for a faint Star of David at the apex, filtering Christianity emanating from within. His mother's beloved childhood neighborhood, the scary place of his childhood, into which crossing from freedom and fear was never a consideration. Racist, conditioned by white supremacy. Detroit has changed, but generations of government-supported racist segregation still clearly delimit fear and freedom. Opposite poles, completely reversible, fears of African American communities, still much more than his, crossing in the other direction. Where he is still free, a hooded black man must fear. Black families stripped of rights gifted to whites. Stockpiled and guarded resource bubbles, stolen by suburbs, buried black neighborhoods under rubble. Equal access only by injury undone. Help does not trickle down when some people think they know what you need better than you. Depressed incomes replicated across generations. White picket fences bequeathed down generations. Repercussions so implacably entrenched, what passes as fair just reinforces divide. African American neighbors regularly moving from fear to freedom at a great cost, with immense courage to confront and battle. White neighbors cannot do the same, merely traveling self-righteously past 8 Mile. So many things we all must fear threaten our freedom to safely coexist. I commend the action that is in action in our community of communities. I have radical hope in freedom, not fear, because of radical healing of fear with freedom, because of radical freedom through love and accountability for generations of injury. It may only be a few geographical miles from freedom to fear, but the return trip must consider it has been hundreds of years as well.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful service today. This weekend, as we celebrate the birth of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and so many other birthdays, as it turns out, that we heard in Joys and Sorrows. Mine as well is tomorrow. So from my vantage point of privilege, it's always just felt so great to accept that we are the land of the free, as I was always told, and the home of the brave. But I now realize we can and are striving to be a land of freedoms. But we can be that only if we are indeed the home of the brave of heart and spirit. This freedom itself is never pure, but rather it's this ever-shifting point around which humankind oscillates, moving forward and backward along a continuum between anarchy and authoritarianism. Further, the work to move that point into just the right place, that work never ends. There are freedoms many enjoy, just as many others do not. And freedoms are forever gained and lost. So the point is moving. And as my awareness of this complexity, of the idea of freedom, comes into greater focus, I also understand how the price of that awareness and the price of knowledge, and especially the price of having freedoms at all, is indeed vigilance. It's constant vigilance to grow and sustain freedoms. It's vigilant courage and vulnerability to take essential risks, vigilance to catch myself when I choose to rest on laurels or evade responsibility, and vigilance to enact the restorative justice necessary to reverse historic injustices, lest they continue to restrict all of our freedoms. For revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. Those are not my words. Those words were spoken at the Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society of Rochester, New York in 1852 by renowned American author, orator, statesman, abolitionist, and escaped slave Frederick Douglass in his speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" And the fact is, Douglass states, the distance between this platform on which he stood that day in 1852, the distance between that and the slave plantation from which he escaped, is considerable. He spoke that day on the 5th of July, because as he reminded the crowd, the 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. So right now, today, 2023, in numerous states where reactionary conservatives erroneously believe that white people are under attack and they fear this loss of control when there is some sort of honest accounting of our country's radical history. In those conditions, right now, Douglass's speech might likely be censored or banned completely in some places. Please think about that for a moment. The words of one of our most important 19th century American ancestors, talking truth to power about the fact of our country's dehumanizing his fellow African Americans. That truth might not be taught today because it would hurt white people's feelings or make them look bad. And that's unconscionable in my estimation. This obstinate forgetting that we're going through is just one tactic in the current drive to implement racist policies that deny civil and human rights. In fact, an honest accounting of our history plainly reveals that these current policies, posing as race neutral, are in reality direct successors to overtly racist historical policies. They're dressed up to conceal their true intent, yet they are just as racist. So acknowledging our country's racism, saying we have it is there, is not devaluing. Stating we will never be a free country is not pessimism. Rather, it is sustaining falsehoods and delusion while chasing an insatiable, unattainable ideal of freedom. That is what consigns society to permanent bondage. Alternatively, if we're claiming freedom as imperfectible. And focusing on realities of history, as painful as that is, enables setting achievable goals, leading to radical, revolutionary action that can realistically bring about the transformative change needed to move the freedom marker along the path toward universal liberty. So the government of the United States has systematically and forcibly prevented African Americans access to resources and opportunities while facilitating easy access to the same for white people for hundreds of years. And not only does it continue to do so in more insidious ways, the repercussions of generations of inequality resonate powerfully. Since the machinations of government, in collusion with the powerful and advantaged, have historically conspired to restrict others from accessing the same, then there exists a stratification, there has to, into privilege and exclusion, which creates inequities. The ability of a white person whose ancestors have cached privilege for years has to, for instance, get a loan to buy a car or drive that car without fearing arrest, far outweighs the ability of African-American contemporaries who carry that additional burden of overcoming those generations of injustice. As long as some are driven by racist policy into what is effectively debt servitude, held hostage by a capitalism that privileges the few over the many, we are not truly a free country. As long as some are denied basic human rights, we are not truly a free country. As long as Americans are not free to walk down a street if their skin is the wrong color, or children of any race not free to go to school without fearing for their life, we're not truly a free country. As long as the powerful and the power drunk, I might add, can hold the country hostage by extreme prejudice and fear-mongering and othering to protect their wealth and dominion and assuage their irrational racist fears, we are not truly a free country. And a tragic irony of all this is that those in power most often don't understand that if they retain what they consider their freedom by denying safety and freedom to others, they too are not truly free. And with their assumed freedoms being tenuous at best, the country falls victim to a destructive desperation to hold on to those supposed freedoms. And we witness this desperation when control or the illusion of control is threatened. Just this past year, we heard the testimony of election worker Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, that their human right to live free from fear was stolen by a certain Donald Trump because he feared loss of power and control. The fact that Mrs. Moss' job is to protect one of our most valuable freedoms, the right to vote, is yet another tragic irony. The US is currently dominated by many very desperate to hold on to power, to wealth, to control, so desperate that they're willing to deceive and they're willing to manipulate. They use means ranging from provoking fear and anger and direct violence to hiding like cowards behind illegitimate protections, often masquerading as straightforwardly established law. Numerous government officials whose sworn duty it is to protect life, liberty, and property are those desperate few, or they collude with the same. So how do we live our UU principles given all that? How do we accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions? How can we promote equity, justice, and compassion toward a world community with peace and universal liberty? It's my contention that a more solid foundation must be laid in the one thing that diffuses hate and anger, that renders self-serving domination impotent. And get ready, because here goes the new minister with that old standby, love. So often, well-intentioned white people, including me, take to the pulpit to talk about love and end up saying nothing of substance. How often Do we feel like shouting to the rafters? No, forget love. We need justice. We need action. And that is true. In fact, justice preserves only what love reunites, contends the theologian Paul Tillich. Justice, he states, is violated when another's power of being is rejected. Justice is the form, actually, in which and through which love performs its work. I contend that must be justice through action. That justice must be justice through action, which involves risk, in which love performs its work. Love, it's not always and hardly ever pacifism, and it's certainly not surrender, placation, or pandering. In fact, there is no powerful fight, no more potent and lasting justice than that achieved through the strength of love. Yes, we need solutions that include specific, targeted, and radical action. But without that baseline of much more potent, unflinching love, none of those specific solutions will be achievable or effective. The author, Bell Hooks, who we recently lost, in her essay, Love is the Practice of Freedom, explains that recognizing the uncontestable humanity in each other requires giving up individual comfort and privileges. And I will add that it also requires confronting violent oppression head on, as many are forced to do because of this country's foundation in white supremacy culture. Only love will bring into clear focus for many in the privileged caste the realities they fear to confront and are working to obscure and erase. Ultimately, as Bell Hooks reiterates, only love can broaden concern to what is hurting the collective us. So now what I'm suggesting is a shock to the system of these truly fearful, and it's reflectively resisted by those like me who are comfortable in the status quo. It's very uncomfortable to talk about. So I must strive to love my fellow human enough to be willing to leave my own safety and my own and take action in order to make the world a safer place. Honestly, if I'm not willing to do that, I don't love myself enough. Unfortunately, the reality is, as the bear is poked more and harder, we experience a desperately violent reactionary response. And unfortunately, we will for a long time to come. The struggle to kill or to tame the bear that is this racism and hate and fear, it will see many hurt and many killed. But the good news is, witnessing more reactionary violence means more people are taking action to break that bear than ever have before. More people are loving bravely. Langston Hughes cautions in his poem Freedom that freedom will not come today, this year, nor ever through compromise and fear. So we must not be afraid. This faith, another ineffable F word, fear, freedom, faith. This faith is not of a traditionally religious nature. I'm a humanist. I have faith in what I can observe using factual evidence to come to a conclusion. But the rational facts are that ancestors have achieved more freedoms while surmounting incredibly high obstacles. The fact is that I have personally witnessed successes along the way to even more freedoms. I am referring to the faith in the power and ability to love sufficiently to effect change that is progressive and revolutionary enough to sustain a society that is ever moving forward toward more and equal freedoms. Joining together in great numbers with love, I have the faith we can succeed. So when we leave here today, as that faith fades toward unattainability, and it will fade, recall Bell Hooks' words that once we choose love, we instinctively possess the inner resources to confront that pain. She reassures us that moving through that pain to the other side, we find the joy and the freedom of spirit that a love ethic brings. Right now, in numerous states where reactionary conservatives erroneously believe white people are under attack and fear loss of control when there is an honest accounting of our country's racial history, Langston Hughes' words and Bell Hooks' words might be censored or banned completely. Think about that for a moment. The teachings of two of our most important 20th and 21st century American ancestors of how to love might not be taught to American youth because it would hurt white people's feelings or make them look bad. That is unconscionable. So when we sit at home alone, screaming about that, cursing at the inconceivable wrong-minded thinking of so many, as I often do, look to the many stories of people fighting and moving from that type of fear to freedom. Many stories of radical change that has and is made and sustained by loving communities of like-minded individuals. Look to those things. Do we, as a species, have the ability to love as radically as is necessary to move from fear to freedom in faith and save our world? Ultimately, regardless of how you arrive there, I'll ask another question. Is there any other rational conclusion but to have faith that we do? I have hope for America, not because we're the land of the free, but because I regularly witness brave people I respect and I love striving against great odds to move from fear to freedoms with faith in humanity's ability to love. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birth we celebrate today, in his speech called The Other America, he actually quoted Frederick Douglass. He quoted him saying that freedom for the slave after the Emancipation Proclamation was not real freedom. It was freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without roofs to cover their heads. It was freedom without bread to eat. It was freedom without land to cultivate. It was freedom and famine at the same time. And those words still ring true. But the following were also said by these two great orators, King and Douglas. In Dr. King's speech, "Where do we go from here?" he stated the oft-repeated phrase, "Let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And in Frederick Douglass's speech, which I previously referenced, the speech at the Ladies Anti-Slavery Society of Rochester, New York, Douglass, referenced the Bible, Isaiah chapter 59, to the crowd before which he spoke in 1852, reassuring them that the arm of the Lord is not shortened and the doom of slavery is certain. Allow me to say, he concluded, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope. He had hope. They both did. And inspired by and in honor of the spirit of these great people, I, Joshua, humbly add this. The reach of love is all-embracing, and its strength is unremitting. I therefore leave off where I began, that we can strive to be a land of freedoms, only if we are indeed the home of the brave of heart, the brave of spirit. Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 1028, The Fire of Commitment.
Okay. By extinguishing this flame, we pause as individuals and as a collective community to remember to regularly return to gratitude and joy, reminded that the work we do should be spiritual fulfilling. And the next part is by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The idea whose time has come today is the idea of freedom and human dignity. And so all over the world, we see something of freedom, a freedom explosion. And this reveals to us that we are in the midst of revolutionary times. An older order is passing away, and a new order is coming into being. The role of the church is to broaden horizons, to challenge the status quo, and to question and break mores. The church has a major role to play in this period of social change. It must remain awake through this revolution. And we have a few announcements to share with you. First of all, about the Potluck and Service Project. This month's potluck is hosted by the Social Justice Committee. Join them after the service in the multipurpose room. Coffee and tea will also be available. In addition, adults and children will be making no-sew fleece blankets to be donated for the Detroit Children's Center. Please join us on this important service project in Room A. Next is the 2023 Canvas. Calling all creative types, the Northwest UU 2023 Canvas Committee is looking for images for this year's pledge drive. There are two themes: uplifting ascension, and/or manifesting our next ministerial leader. What will he, she look like or be like? Images can be as simple or ornate as you desire. Color is preferred. Original art is preferred. If you adapt commercial images, please include attribution source. The deadline is tomorrow, Monday, January 16th, so work fast. Submit one or both ideas as JPEGs to Beata Lamparski or Martha Spear. And then next, the 8th Principle Implementation Team is sponsoring Adore, a dialogue in race and ethnicity facilitated by Paula Cole-Jones, along with Mary Mueller and Vanessa Washington. Join us in reading the book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment by Tom Hartman. The next session is this Wednesday, January 18th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And then our last announcement is by Linda Gobeski.
Thank you, Tom. And good morning, everybody. I'm here to provide you with an update on the Ministerial Search Committee. We've received our minister packets from interested candidates earlier this month, and we met with the UUA on January 4th to help us review what comes next in the process. We're currently busy with initial interviews, and the next round of interviews will begin sometime in February. So updates, I mean, we're really hopeful and we're really glad and we're really looking for your positive energy. Updates from the committee, including the congregational survey and the cottage meeting summaries, which everybody, well, a lot of you participated in at the end of last year, can be found in the newsletter update and also on the church website. We plan to provide you with more updates at the congregational meeting on January 29th. So please, with gratitude for your support and your continued well wishes, we're very excited. Thanks.
Meeting on Sunday, January 29th. I think we were supposed to announce it. Anyway, so we now have our postulate.
We'll believe in cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers, sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers, sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be just one in the number as we stand against tyranny. To me, young people come first. They come first. They have the courage where we fail. If I can just shine a light on as they carry us through the gale. We who believe in freedom